Hey guys, this is Mike from Sons Liberty Gunworks, and we're going to do a deeper dive on the Mark 1. In the first video about Mark 1, it was kind of focused on the form factor and an overview of the rifle and the concept. Here I want to go a little bit deeper into the mechanics, some of the different materials, and really what makes the Mark 1 different. Reading a lot of the questions in the comments, really some great questions. I want to get in there and start answering some of those. One of the questions we get a lot of is if the Mark 1 rail is compatible with other upper receivers. And the answer is that it's not. The Mark 1 rail, okay, it has two steel indexing dowels versus our normal L89, which has one. On this one, we not only had to incorporate the cable management route, so we couldn't put the dowel in the center, but we also wanted to make it stronger to anticipate all of the potential weight that could be on top of the rail, and the fact that the rifle is going to be used in probably a more dynamic scenario, just making that entire system overall more robust. So if you see those two steel dowels, they correspond to obviously the two holes for those. Another question that we got a lot was on the stippling. If you look, there's really aggressive stippling on here, which gives the rifle like an amazing grip. Anybody that's felt this thing wishes they had it on every rifle they own. This is not easy to do. This isn't machined in. Trust me, we tried it. We tried every possible way to replicate this kind of texture in a way that was less labor intensive. The stippling on here is actually laser stippled, and it gives it like kind of just a lot more aggressive texture. And we even found like using even like more powerful lasers, like more expensive lasers, it didn't have the same effect, because part of what you're feeling is like the slag of how it burns. It does have a really cool effect though. If you've ever, like the guys that have felt it, it doesn't feel like anything that's currently out there. A question I got on the first video and from people that have seen a lot of the photos is they ask what this bump here is, what this line is that marries up to the upper and the lower. It was important for us to build in, like I said, from the ground up, the ability to service the rifle without having to remove the rail, considering how much stuff it could potentially go onto that rail. We needed the ability to remove the port door from the rear. The Mark 1 port door rod is considerably longer. That bump that you're seeing there is how we're able to remove it this way if you have to service the ejection port for whatever reason. One of the most common critiques or questions we got was on Ambi, Ambi bolt hold open or Ambi mag release. When you talk to the professional end user and you talk to the commercial end user, what people want in a rifle is different. Not everyone considers Ambi stuff super desirable. Hypothetically speaking, if you were building a gun for, say, OTB, over the beach, or sandy and salt or whatever, the more springs and holes and buttons and shit you have on the gun is more stuff for debris to get into, okay? And sometimes you want to default to mechanical simplicity on that. And even if that wasn't a consideration, even if you were just, building a fighting gun, again, defaulting sometimes to mechanical simplicity is a better answer. Now, we realize that in the commercial market and in some other contract requirements for different programs we're working on, that stuff is important. If we went through the trouble of building the rifle the way we did, trust me, we can figure out how to hold a bolt open on the right side of the gun. Another question we got was why we deleted the QD sockets like we have on the L89, why they're not on the Mark 1. Again, the rifle, the way this was built, and for kind of the clientele that we had in mind, they're probably more likely to hard mount a sling to the weapon in some other way other than QD. Now, the rifle will ship with our angled QD sockets, so you can mount it anywhere you want on the rail. You still have those options. There's QD sockets on the stock, but we're gonna probably have an emphasis on how to better hard mount slings to this gun, considering the nature of the rifle. And finally, a comment we got a lot was asking why we lasered 556 on the port door. If you don't like that, you're welcome to change it. Made it super easy. You can remove the port door this way. The reason why 556 is on the port door is because this rifle might end up in a locker that has multiple rifles. That there's 300 blackout, there might be 6 ARC, there might be some other calibers in there, right? And so being able to clearly identify, the caliber of the rifle in a way that can't be missed is kind of helpful. And so that's why it's on there. If you don't like it, port doors are cheap. Another difference on the Mark 1 rail, you can see we have cut these vents into the side around the barrel nut. There is more exhaust holes up here, also on the bottom. We wanted to do this so we can release heat. Part of the goal of the Mark 1 was to be able to go through longer, like more demanding training schedules where you could shoot an entire loadout on a suppressed rifle without having to put the rifle down. Keeping the gun, the rail specifically, as cool as possible for extended training sessions was a goal. That was, it incorporates also the titanium barrel nut. Titanium is a very poor conductor of heat, so titanium is going to take a little bit longer to heat up and like radiate that heat down the rail. And on these, we actually are using a coating specifically meant to help dissipate heat faster. The coating was developed for aerospace, for like vehicles re-entering the Earth from orbit. And it does help to dissipate that heat a little bit faster. Now, granted, you can't completely break the laws of thermodynamics. I'm not saying the gun doesn't get hot. What I am saying is the gun is going to stay cooler than any other gun we've ever made or that we tested it against, specifically with like heavier strings of suppressed fire. We talked a little bit on the first video about the Mark 1 bolt catch, bolt release. And it is a larger paddle. Obviously it's fenced in. Go watch the first video to look at, you know, kind of why we did all that. But considering the extra mass of the Mark 1 bolt catch, we also went ahead and modified the plunger. We went ahead and trimmed that back to allow us to use a much heavier, more powerful spring than mil-spec. You can see the mil-spec plunger here, and you can see the Mark 1 plunger there, but having a more powerful spring there to move that heavier mass of that bolt catch, it alleviates problems that we saw on other aftermarket bolt catches that would sometimes not achieve last round hold open because it had to move so much mass. This one, it doesn't. Also, the rifle being fired in any position, it is keeping that bolt catch right where it needs to be despite the extra mass. You're not having to worry about the thing cam into the bolt path, regardless of what position the rifle is in as it's fired. Our philosophy to building rifles applies to the Mark 1 as well, right? Every rifle begins its life as a barrel, and we build the rest of the rifle to support that barrel, which brings us to the Mark 1 barrel tech. The Mark 1 is going to have a few different barrel options. All of them are going to have the same medium contour. We wanted to have the lightest weight barrel we could that still maintained rigidity and had minimal kind of shift whenever you are putting suppressors on the gun. But all of it had to be take into consideration demanding firing schedules and just overall barrel performance, not just service life, but also, you know, precision, consistency, and all that. For those of y'all familiar with our like SPR precision barrels that have been out for a couple of years, and you've seen the performance of that, we took some of that tech, some of that novel P3 rifling, again, that is less dependent on the threat for precision, making the barrel itself harder to kill. The construction method of the barrel itself has a significant effect on barrel life. First option we have for the Mark 1 is actually a stainless steel barrel, obviously built with the precision emphasis in mind. Also, it is a corrosion resistant material and then how we treat it. The other barrel option that we have is your 4150 chromoly, which also has the P3 rifling. This is chrome lined, phosphate treated, again, 5/8 thread. They're all gonna be pretty conservatively gassed because the way that raceway and other things we've done to the gun makes it highly shootable and reliable, even with a conservative gas port. But again, you know, chrome lined P3, new rifling, new profile, very, very stout and, you know, tough barrel for endurance. Then finally, we're going to get into the ARMAD. The difficulty with ARMAD is that we currently bought the global supply of the right bar stock for it. It's a material that's very, very hard to get, and it's a very hard material to work with. Now, the ARMAD barrel steel is legitimately a next-gen barrel steel. Go look this up. It's ARMAD. It's made by a company called Albert Duval. If you guys are familiar with the real old school HK416s, Albert Duval was who made the barrel steel for those guns. And ARMAD is what happens after you give those guys an extra 25 or 30 years of thinking about how to make it better. In testing on these, what we saw was that they would stay and maintain threshold somewhere north of 70,000 rounds of like military pressure 5.56. That's not why we wanted to use the ARMAD in this gun though. It's not just for insanely long barrel life, because at 70,000 rounds, at that point, your gas tube would, or a lot of other parts of the gun are dead. And on the Mark I ARMAD barrels, these are not only chrome lined, they're QPQ'd over the chrome, again, over the ARMAD. And with the P3 rifling, with the heavier crown, it is a very, very tough barrel. Coming back to the gas ports on these, again, they're conservatively gassed, but we're able to do that because there was a bit more consideration put into the geometries of the raceway, lubricity on carrier coating, and then just how we treated some of the internals of the upper receiver. In order for the gun to be reliable and shootable, that's a bit of a challenge, right? Because most of the time you're giving up reliability to increase shootability. And there's a lot of things that we test the rifle for that are not, a lot of the commercial market kind of takes for granted. Like for instance, when the rifle is being pointed straight, you know, away from you, like parallel to the ground, a lot of the weight of the carrier is supported by the raceway itself. So like a lot of that mass that you're driving inside the gun is being supported by it resting on the raceway. A lot of people don't consider the fact that the rifle needs to be able to function and fire like pointed straight down, right? So whenever that gas port is having to lift the entire mass of the carrier and the buffer and compress the spring being pointed straight down, that's a test that you should make sure your rifle can actually do. The inverse is also true too. So whenever the rifle is pointed straight up, that you have adequate power in the spring and mass in the buffer to drive the complete weight of the carrier back into battery, especially on a full mag when that first round is hardest to strip. Those are like little tests that everyone should make sure their rifle can accomplish, and make sure it can accomplish that even under adverse conditions. Mark I, you know, we tested down to -40. The rifle had to do that at -40 degrees. It had to do that also at, you know, extreme higher temperatures. To make a rifle be able to do all of that and also be incredibly shootable, that's a challenge. Historically, our approach to rifles has always been reliability above all else. Like nothing came before reliability. And that is still true with the Mark I. As we evolve as a company, and as the rifles and the products start to evolve, there's more to making a great rifle than just simply reliability, right? We don't ever want to sacrifice that. Our goal is to reduce the potential for mechanical failure to as close to zero as possible, okay? And so any modification to the weapon done at the expense of reliability should be avoided. With that being said, to build like the next generation of fighting rifles, it not only has to be reliable, you have to take weight into consideration. You have to take shootability into consideration. You have to take form factor into consideration. When you look at some of the enablers and some of the things that are being attached to this weapon in order to increase the entire lethality of the system, the rifle built from the ground up around what those things are gonna have to be and how the rifle is gonna actually have to be used, that is the evolution of the gun. That is how you're making the gun more of a systems level approach to where anything you might want to attach to it, the rifle is preemptively built specifically for that. So again, in the first video where we talked a lot about form factor and the scalloping and all that kind of good stuff, it's important to understand kind of why that is. There is just not a lot of available real estate once you start putting all of the other enablers, again, that enhanced lethality of the operator, onto the rifle. And the Mark I is specifically built to incorporate all of that. A major consideration of the Mark I was to maintain complete backwards compatibility so the rifle could be serviced anywhere in the world. We wanted to maximize what could be achieved using M4 legacy geometry internally in the gun. There's a lot of benefits to that. Avoiding proprietary things also avoids single points of failure in supply chain logistics. And of course, for our commercial market, which is, you know, our bread and butter, and like honestly why I got into the rifle business was to arm Americans. If there was a civil unrest or if there was a supply chain crisis, I want our customers to be able to service this rifle with existing parts. That's why we didn't get super exotic on extractor geometry or on bolt geometry or things like that. A question that I saw a lot in the comments is like, it's just another M4, or like, you know, when are we going to the next generation, blah, blah, blah. This rifle is the next generation. If you start looking at the barrel steel and some of the other materials that go into the gun, the way the rifle is developed as a systems level approach with all of the other things that increase the lethality of it, and you start looking at the ammo technology that is coming. This is open source. Go look at that 7 backcountry from Federal, or go look at some of the stuff that Black Ark is doing. This rifle has a lot of years left in it. The next few years of small arms development is going to be really exciting. I think we're hitting a renaissance period where it's not just our company. There are a few companies that are really thinking about the future and about what can be achieved in these guns. And you're going to see a leap. You're going to see a materials leap. You're going to see coatings leaps. You're going to see leaps in ammunition technology and just overall like the performance and lethality of the gun. The M4 platform isn't going away anytime soon. Neither is 5.56 ammo. Neither are the billion mags, bolt carrier groups and parts and stuff that are already in circulation. Why not advance that platform as far as you possibly can? That is the Mark I. The Mark I is not an incremental improvement over an M4. It is legitimately a leap over M4 technology. There's still a lot more to cover on the Mark I, but we kind of want to release things in bite-sized segments so people can digest. So keep an eye out for more information, and thanks for watching.